big companies go woke to eliminate competition. After all, they can afford the costs to comply with woke regulations, whereas small companies cannot. True. So true. Dude, these big companies, they can put up with all sorts of bullshit regulations. Like, oh, you gotta like have compliance for like DEI. Oh, you gotta have compliance. You gotta have like minimum wage this. You gotta have all. It's so much easier for big companies to offset the cost of these things. But small companies can't.
Hey internets, you may have heard of the concept of woke capitalism. And in this video I'll be explaining what this theory is, why it's mostly a flawed theory, why it mostly gets most things wrong, but also what it gets correct. Because it's one of those interesting theories that's not really completely off the mark, it just doesn't always blame the right things for the problems that it identifies. And this is partly because the theory can be roughly divided into two different camps. The first camp is what you could call the light version of—
God damn, I freaking love Mentis Wave videos. One of my favorites, honestly.
Woke capitalism theory. These are the people who simply point out the phenomenon.
By the way, if you guys want a primer on just like economic stuff, just read Thomas Sowell's Basic Economics. It's a good one.
Corporate virtue signaling and call it out as fake, and they simply—
and then you can say that you read black literature. Well, excuse me, have you read Basic Economics? Black literature?
identify the symptoms of woke capitalism.
I'm a connoisseur
and they
of
call
black
it woke
literature
capitalism,
myself.
but they don't really necessarily go much further than that. And then the
Hi,
other camp
Witty.
you have what you can call the full woke capitalism theory, which believes that capitalism inevitably leads to and causes woke ideology through consumer culture. This is the theory that wokeness is actually inherent to capital, and that any capitalist system is inevitably doomed to show the symptoms of woke capital. And what's interesting about the full woke capitalist theory, as opposed to the light version,
Dude, that
is that you
fucking
can see it
picture.
coming from both the dissident far right in some ways, but you can also see the same thing coming from the far left, specifically the outright communist tankie left. They both basically argue that capitalism and this aggressive push for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and all these brands, for example, adopting the pride flag to show their allegiance to this ideology, to show their support for DEI, they argue that all of these things would just be, again, inevitable. And this idea comes with usually belief that wokeness is a postmodernist creation of capitalism itself, that capital inherently breaks down the bonds of family and church and ethnic identity, etc., etc., and it does this as a scheme to turn people into—
By the way, the reason why capitalism is so OP compared to other systems, is because capitalism basically uses it uses incentive as its driving force, which is just a universal rule of humanity, of understanding humanity, is incentive. It's like every system that tries to get around incentive just fails dramatically.
these interchangeable worker bee types, and then it uses woke ideology to fill the void of those bonds that it has destroyed. That identity politics and collective guilt and virtue signaling to the DEI Church of Correctthink thus effectively becomes the new church, except that it has been perverted and inverted all
Sure,
for
I
the sake
will.
of seeking profits.
I will be
And therefore
down.
they argue that capitalism will always inevitably lead to this type of society, a society of multiculturalism and identity politics and virtue signaling in favor of who the current victim trademark is, where corporations are constantly worshiping victimhood and pandering to the DEI victimhood narrative.
You
Effective.
want to know what's funny? I keep thinking about this, guys. And I feel like a lot of you guys feel the same way. Like, let me... How do I explain this? You know how they think that we're very, very hateful? That, oh, we're like all of the ists and phobe and all of that, right? It's really funny because it's like, I don't hate gay people. I just hate these prideful freaks. It's not the same. It's like, I don't hate black people. I hate the criminals that are breaking into stores and stealing stuff. It's like, I don't hate artists. I hate these raging freaks that don't do their job properly. It's not even remotely the same, but then they just assume that you're talking about the entire group when it's obviously not the case. Every single time.
in order to just trick people into buying their product, as well as to trick the working class into constantly fighting amongst each other for who gets the victim status next.
Dude, I'm really not a hateful person, to be honest. I'm not. In fact, I'm a little bit too sympathetic. I think so. I really think so. I'm not very hateful. Claiming capitalism will lead to the opposite is like claiming peace causes war and causes evil. Thank you, Affliction, as well. Thank you for the sub. Thank you.
This part of the idea of woke capitalism that is mostly incorrect. But before breaking down why it's incorrect, I'd like to thank this video sponsor. The reality is, if you are not using a VPN...
Again, thank you so much for the gift sub. Thank you. Thank you for the 5 gift subs. Thank you so much, again. You need to return the most racist VTuber award. The funny thing is I'm to the point now where they've called me everything. I just kind of say, yeah, okay, whatever. Sure. They're like, Leaflit, you fucking Nazi. And I'm like, jawohl. Like, I just don't care anymore.
It's of the constantly fighting amongst each other for who gets the victim status next. And it's this part of the idea of woke capitalism that is mostly incorrect. But before breaking down why it's incorrect, I'd like to thank this video sponsor. The reality is, if you are not using a VPN these days, you are susceptible to having your data stolen by copyright trolls, government agencies, identity thieves.
Jawohl is just like Roger, basically. It's like, Roger, sir.
Who the fuck is Leaflit?
That's what Jawohl is.
Scammers and hackers, all
Jawohl doesn't mean, like, you know, genocide some people or anything like that. Jeez, holy fuck.
All of whom are in the business of ripping you off or extorting you in one way or another. That's where this video's sponsor, Private Internet Access, comes into play. They keep your data safe by masking your connection through no-log RAM-only servers, and it should be emphasized that their no-logs policy has been proven several times in court and in various independent audits, thus keeping your data out of the hands of bad actors, whoever they may be.
When you get called a Nazi, just pop the Roman. No, what you gotta do is you can't just do just the regular pop the Roman. You gotta take your so here's how you do it. You gotta take your right hand, you prepare the right hand, right? So you prepared action, you prepare to do the Roman, and with your left hand you take your index finger and your middle finger and you put it right above your lip, and then you do it.
To data security and encryption, it also has some nice additional features like auto-blocking of known malicious domains used by ad trackers and malware. So it's also helpful towards keeping your system clean of viruses and other trashware you don't want. It's also by far the most stable VPN I've used, which is why it's been my go-to for years, and it's available on all devices, including Linux. But in addition to security, Private Internet Access also has servers all over the globe, meaning it can also be used to unlock geo-restricted features. Many websites limit your choices and shopping deals based on where you are located, and many streaming services like Prime Video, Netflix, Hulu, etc. they all restrict the movies and TV shows you can watch based on your location as well. And with this, you can switch your IP to whatever region you want, thus massively expanding your streaming library, all at a very low cost. Because Private Internet Access is also very affordable. If you use my link in the description or scan this QR code, you can get it now for 83% off at only $2.03 per month, and with 4 months free, and all covered with a 30-day money-back guarantee. So there's really no reason not to give it a try. It's a good VPN. Anyways, in order to get started with understanding what woke capitalist theory gets wrong, you first have to understand the most important thing that it actually gets right, which is that woke capitalism is entirely fake. This is something that many people have noticed for years and years, but not everybody fully understands what it implies. Take this post from Conspiracy Reddit 4 years ago. Woke capitalism is all BS. American corporations claim to be all in for LGBT rights here, but they scrub all references to LGBT rights from their brands in China, and then of course he just repeats that it is aka all BS. And this is entirely true. They don't really believe the ideology. Some of them do. I'm sure they have many true believers working in many corporations, but a lot of it is very easily proven to be total nonsense, especially when you look at any company under the microscope. Like for instance, let's just take Wendy's as an example. Here's Wendy's back 6 years ago on their main website, how Wendy's supports LGBTQ plus allyship. Got their little pride flag and celebrating Spirit Day. But do they really believe this? Do they actually care? care. A quick look at Wendy's executive leadership reveals that historically they've been relatively Republican-leaning. And actually reading into what Wendy's claims they did to support LGBTQ plus allyship, it appears to be nothing more than lip service. It's very easy to say that you support certain things, but their actions amount to little more than just another form of advertising. And so the reality is they probably don't care.
I don't even think this is just capitalism. I mean, it's capitalism, like businesses. I think this is like all just people, you know, just regular people, I think, are like this.
The thing that Wendy's cares about as a corporation is to get people into their doors so that they will buy spicy nugs. And whatever mask they wear is just a means to that end. And so ultimately it's just seeking profits, which gives you a hint as to what's specifically wrong with woke capitalist theory. When you realize that it's all fake and that it's all essentially just an advertisement campaign, what's really going on starts to become a lot more clear. So I'll now go over a lot of the claims made by people pushing the hard woke capitalist theory to show you what I mean. Starting with the idea that woke capitalism is a plot to turn identity into a commodity and thus transform the populace into a legion of low IQ, low impulse control consumer cattle slaves. That it's all just a big conspiracy that these guys behind closed doors have decided to play the long game. A future where a very small number of elites rule over a massive civilization of complete knuckle-dragging buffoons who will...
Yeah, they got this plan from the DMT elves that are hiding in the code of the wall in the laser levelers. Yeah, that's where they got this
simply consume product and then get excited for next product. And this is an interesting theory because there's definitely a little bit of truth to it. Some elites have indeed shown that they think this way. However, for saying that every single corporation is doing woke capitalism for this specific reason, it kind of starts to break down because there's a much more rational explanation. It is far more plausible that most of these
No, did you guys hear about that? About the laser levelers with the DMT? So, like, apparently, this is what they claim, is that if you take a laser leveler and you diffuse the light from it, and then you shine it on the wall, and then you take DMT, you can see through the wall, and you can see the code of the universe. But I read that the laser levelers were just made in China, and so, like, there was an imprint. There's a imprint on the inside of it of Chinese characters, so that they could see the Chinese characters in the laser.
Corporations that went woke actually did so simply because fraudulent market researchers told them they should in order to pander to a woke audience. And so companies were simply marketing to what they believed the audience to be, that what they believed the average person to believe. This is sometimes known as the myth of the modern audience. And the problem with it is that the modern audience doesn't really exist. It is entirely a construction of woke ideologues projecting their own beliefs onto the populace, and intellectuals who are true believers of the
and the way that you know this is true is because if they were real, they wouldn't all be failing right now, because they would be hard supported. They wouldn't need to force us to like their thing.
Ideology, then push it into various institutions. One of them, again, being market research, which is a huge rabbit hole that
let me go into that like slightly deeper, because I think this is pretty important. It's not that people like, or even, you know, I go so far as to say even care about there being like a gay character in a game or whatever. Games previously that had things like that succeeded not because of that. Does that make sense? It was more like it was a part of the game, but the game was also good, right? And the writing was also good. So it didn't really matter that there was like a gay character or whatever, right? It was never, the success was not attributed to there being a gay character, right? And sure, there is a small subset of people that are like, oh, you know, I really would like to have a gay character, or I'd really like to have a fat character, or I'd really like to have a black character, or this or that, whatever the hell, right? Like, I mean, I'm gonna be real. I thought it was kind of cool that like there was an Arctic Asian girl character, like that explorer from in Overwatch. Like I liked Mei a lot. I thought she was really cool, right? But the thing is most people don't care about that, right? Like each individual person cares about a small amount of things, and finding the overlap of like where those things intersect is how you can find like where if it's gonna be worth it or not, right? And it's kind of like if you make it all about that thing, then it doesn't actually target a wider audience. It doesn't target like anywhere close to the same audiences like gamers, for instance, right? You've been represented. Yeah, true. I was really happy about that, honestly. I'm gonna be real. I mean, it's not that. It's not even that. Guys, it's not even that representation is even bad. To be honest, like let's be real. It's not actually bad. It's bad when it's forced and it's malicious. That's when people don't like it. That's when people are like, okay, like you kind of fucking around now with me, right? Like when you do, like, for instance, when it comes at the expense of the story, it comes at the expense of the immersion, then it's a problem, right? So like, for instance, if you're like, we're gonna have our game set in medieval Europe and it's historical, and then it's like you look around and it's just like all of the races combined. It's like, bro, like that's not what I wanted to play. That doesn't make any fucking sense, right? And then it becomes kind of like, okay, why are you doing this? Right? Thank you, Catalyst, by the way. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the 1,000 bits. If Gucci Marks was watching, he'd like to see a Hassan parody of John Lennon's cringe song, Imagine. Solid Snake, thank you for the Prime, and thank you, Powerfest, for the 100. If the character's written well, I don't give a damn if the character's gay or trans or whatever. It's just make a good character. Exactly. But the point I'm trying to say is, right, is that there is only a small percentage of characters that are like, wow, I really like that they added this character because this character represents me, right? That's like a very small amount of people. So like if you make your game only about that and you don't have anything else in the game, then like, yeah, nobody cares about it. And so that's what keeps happening. They keep thinking if we just add a gay, then we'll collect the gay. If we add a black, we'll collect the black. You see what I mean? It's like they're playing like fucking, they're trying to collect the Exodia of video games representation to make it so that they think, oh, maybe we'll sell the game then. But it's just not how it works. People don't care if there are minorities in games. People just care that the game is good. And that's where they kind of lost their way. Thank you, Toxic Beat and Rebel, for the subs. Thank you. Alright, let's keep going.
Is worth its own video, but I'll just give you a TLDR here. From the early 2010s to roughly 2024, a lot of intellectual agencies...
Fuck, sorry, now I remember where I was going with this. I'm such an idiot. Sorry, my head is kind of scrambled today. There's a lot I'm thinking about. But the modern audience not existing, right? Is that the problem is they don't really care about the core audience of a thing. They only care about secondary and tertiary audiences. They don't care about core. And because of that, no one's going to play it. Because all of the they think, guys, they think that if they get gay, if they put a gay person in, that they're going to get gay people that don't play video games. You need to find the intersection of like the video gamers and then maybe the gays. And you'll notice that like that intersection is kind of small. So then that's the part that you're fishing for, which is why you need to like actually make the game actually good, because then the gamers will play it too. But they can't do that because they're too full of themselves. Well, either that or they make it just completely irritating. They make it like way too much about the gay thing and then it just gets irritating.
Pushed the claim that DEI would be good for business, that woke ideology infecting everything was simply what the customers wanted. And they used a lot of statistical fallacies and typical disingenuous tactics in their pitch, things like pretending to not understand that there's a difference between revealed preference and stated preference, or not controlling for just very obvious confounding variables, so things like comparing a film with a lot of wokeness in it to a film with very little wokeness, without also comparing the budgets of those films. And another thing that was very common is them just misrepresenting
people
what
do
wokeness
this?
is. They'll conflate it and compare it.
Are they just liars? Like, are these like statisticians or whatever? That these like study, they're just fucking liars, man. You know, like what the fuck?
The things that aren't really woke, like conflating DEI ideology and woke ideology with simply the presence of minorities, which is actually not what woke ideology really is. And to make a very long story short, they lied. Woke ideologues that have managed to worm their way into Western intellectual institutions lied at the top of their lungs. They sold a pitch that woke would be good for business to corporate America, and it was complete 100% bogus. It was all a massive scam. And so most of corporate America just ended up injecting woke ideology into whatever their PR campaign was for the moment, because they believe that that's how society was. Corporations that are selling a product, corporations that have to actually engage in voluntary trade, well, they kind of have a strong incentive to always go with whatever they believe the dominant ideology of society is. And so they went woke because they believed that that was the dominant ideology. And corporate America believed that because intellectual institutions told them so. Which then, of course, explains what's really going on. It just fully explains why they drop the woke ideology in countries where it's obviously not the dominant ideology. They're just advertising and changing their PR campaigns to match the views of what they think the plebs they're talking to believe. In other words, you could actually say that woke capitalism is really just how do you do, fellow kids, to Generation Z. And so for most corporations anyways, this is a much more plausible explanation than some multi-generational plot to turn everybody into mindless, cultureless, obedient cattle. And so woke capitalism is actually very much just a second order effect of the cathedral going woke, which went woke all the way back in the 1970s. Because woke ideology is really just the mindset of viewing any inequalities as being the result of some kind of malicious action, and thus it directs envy at the more successful groups of society. And that's where my definition of wokeness comes in. You get this aggressive push for
like the force of jealousy and envy is crazy. Dude, it completely takes over people's minds. It's wild. Name a less corrupting force than jealousy, dude. It's unreal.
Diversity and equity inclusion, all based essentially on the equity fallacy. And envy directed towards more successful groups, along with the claim that they've done something wrong, is really something that's existed since the dawn of human civilization.
Dude, the more I think about it, man, the 7 deadly sins are truly the 7 deadly sins. Like, actually, each one of those just fucks you up, like, unreal levels. Like, if it doesn't fuck you up now, it fucks you up later, like pretty bad. Serious, thank you so much for the 500 bits. My statistics professor put it best: there are liars, damn liars, and statisticians. Yes, true.
Very, very old mindset. But woke ideology in its current form,
the archetype of actual grifter, says archetypist. Thank you so much, archetypist. Thank you.
Call woke ideology and how it is actually practiced and what they believe is really just the equity fallacy of globalism, which has its roots in the civil rights movement, and how ever since then it became taboo for anybody in academia to suggest that the reasons for inequalities were anything other than some form of discrimination. And this of course was going on and happening all way before we started seeing what we call woke capitalism, and so that's what really caused all of this. Another problem with saying that woke capitalism is a long game by all these corporations to turn everybody into low IQ, low impulse control consumer cattle is that it's not actually a very good long game. Low IQ populations tend to reduce economic growth overall. Sure, they're easier to manipulate, but that doesn't always necessarily translate into being a good consumer. Overall, it's actually the middle class that does the most consumption. Along with the more educated upper middle class, well, they're the ones who actually generate enough wealth to splurge on things. If people becoming low IQ consumer cattle was truly good for profits, then the GDP and consumption maps per capita would not also so closely match the world IQ map. And so you can kind of think of it by putting yourselves in the shoes of a CEO of a large corporation, and let's just pretend that you're able to choose between one type of consumer.
Well, you know what? I have a good idea. We can fix this. We just import all of the low IQ places.
A has about $5,000 of disposable income per year. This is including credit, by the way. And this consumer will spend the entirety of that $5,000 every year because they have no impulse control whatsoever, versus, say, consumer B, who has 50 grand of disposable income per year, but they will invest and save about 50% of that while only spending 25 grand a year on.
Dude, I was watching Dr. Stone, dude. And, like, there's a part where they go through the Soyuz Canal. So Suez, not Soyuz. Suez Canal. And I told my mom, I said, I hope they don't revive the people in Somalia. I said, don't do it, guys. Don't do it. Nah.
Consumer goods.
Don't do
Which
it!
consumer would you rather have? It's pretty obvious that going with a population comprised with the
mistake,
mindset
guys.
of B, of the latter consumer, would be better for your business overall. Or to put it very simply, a lower IQ society is actually bad for profits. And it's pretty easy to understand why. That being said, there are indeed people within our ruling elite that absolutely would love everybody to be low IQ, easy to manipulate slaves.
Yeah, if you don't know the story of Dr. Stone, basically everyone on Earth turns to stone. And then they have to make like this chemical. It was like, what was it? It was like is it nitric acid or something? No, it wasn't formic acid. Nitric acid, yeah, nitric acid. So they had to make nitric acid to revive people. So if you pour nitric acid on a person that gets turned to stone, they get unbroken. So like the entire world is stone, and so like they have to like revive like all of humanity. And I was like, when they were going like I was like, okay guys, we need to skip like the whole area, like to the that entire area that's like to the west of that. You gotta skip, hard skip.
And that, of course, is the state, which brings me to the next thing to refute. And this is something that comes a bit more from the far-left tankies. They'll claim that capital is woke, and for proof of this, they will point to the regimes of Stalin and Mao Zedong, as well as even sometimes North Korea, which may appear on the surface to, not really follow woke ideology very much. At least in the way people in the West view woke ideology, you're not really going to see that in North Korea at all. And if you look in the past, if you look at the history of Mao and Stalin, well,
they went to India because they needed to get the math guy, which is fucking hilarious. We need someone who's really good at math. India.
They weren't exactly very big
Fucking
friends
real,
to
dude.
LGBT or virtue signaling, the certain things that we tend to virtue signal in the West about. However, this is short-sighted because it's taking the Western...
Yeah, he ended up being half Japanese. That's so funny, man. Holy shit, dude.
modern day manifestation of the woke mindset and then projecting that onto history, which doesn't really make much sense. When we look at it more from the framework of woke ideology being the essence of envy directed at the more successful groups, or just this general idea of inequality means that somebody cheated, well then all of a sudden their regimes actually reveal themselves to be extremely woke.
Wait, hold on. Never mind.
Both Stalin and Mao Zedong embodied this more broad definition of wokeness through their core Marxist-Leninist ideology and how they governed. It was just less along identity politics lines of whether or not you identify with LGBTQ plus or whatever. They drew it more on class lines, with the sell that those who owned the means of production were exploiting the working class. Take, for example, this quote from Joseph Stalin. "The world is divided up into two antagonistic camps, the camp of a small handful of capitalists and the camp of the majority, the proletarians. The proletarians work day and night, nevertheless they remain poor. The capitalists do not work, nevertheless they are rich."
Dude, I read the Communist Manifesto. It's actually so fucking retarded, bro. Like, it's actually so dumb. Like, it's unbelievably bad. Like, holy fuck, man. Like, it's oh my god. Like, it just doesn't. It completely skips over human incentive. And it also assumes that all people who do management do nothing. Like, the basic assumption is anybody that owns a business and anybody that does any sort of management is useless to the system. And they don't actually do any work, which is fucking retarded. Like, I don't know, man. It's just so bad. If you actually think that the Communist Manifesto is like the way to go, you are just a retard. Like, I don't know what to tell you. But you know what, though? We do have a lot of retards. I've realized this actually in the last couple days, actually. You know, I've been exposed to quite the level of retardo. And I just think we have a lot of idiots in this world. Like, a lot more than you could possibly imagine. And like, every time I think I have a grasp of the amount of idiots that exist in this world, I'm surprised every time.
This takes place not because the proletarians are unintelligent and the capitalists are genius.
Catalyst, thank you so much for the bits. The Serval State by Hiller Bellrock would be a breath of fresh air after the Communist Manifesto. 72 archetypes, the archetype of actual grifters isn't what I said. I said they are the incorporate archetypes statistics always. What I neglected is that this doesn't always apply vice versa. All grifters use stats, but not all statisticians are grifters. I see. Sage Money, thank you so much for the bits. The camp of the workers, the camp of the welfare queens. I know, right?
But because the capitalists appropriate the fruit of the labor of the proletarians, because the capitalists exploit the proletarians. This quote from Stalin here is very much in line with the very essence of what woke ideology is. The claim that the haves only have because they stole from
exploit, and by exploit you mean like shoulders all of the risk? Shoulders all of the risk and all of the stress? Is that what you mean? About how like the work doesn't end when you go home? Iron Tiger, thank you so much for the gift subs. Thank you so much. Thank you for the gift subs. I appreciate it. Thank you. And again, guys, like I don't think it's bad, honestly, to work a 9 to 5. I think that's great. It's a great choice because then you can just go home and you can chill and you can spend time with your family and spend time playing video games. And you have your obligation for like a certain period of time. And then you get money, and then you can use that on whatever you want, and that's great. There's nothing wrong with that, right? But the idea that like these people don't understand that if you're a business owner or if you're a business owner, basically you're always thinking about work because there's always something that you could be doing, and there's always something to worry about. Like the work doesn't end for you ever, basically. You have to specifically carve out time for it to be over. And even then, you still worry about it.
The have-nots. And this is a very useful message for the state, because the state can then sell to the people who they are telling are the oppressed group the idea that all they need to do is simply follow the state and give the state power and swear their allegiance to the government, and the government will then take care of them. That the state can then right this alleged wrong, thus justifying the existence of the state for entirely the purpose of redistributing the wealth. And so thus the government state dictator, they're the ones who very much have a very strong incentive to ensure the populace is a
it's literally like, guys, this is what it's like. It's like you have an inheritance. Okay. Let's say that like you have some relative and you didn't know about them, and then they died and they passed all of their money, their riches, onto like your family. And your family is like, yo, you know that crackhead that we got that always wastes money and he's always buying fucking crack? And then he always says he's going to do something and he never does it. We should have him handle the money. That's what it's like, giving government control of things. It's literally the same.
Populace filled with people who belong to the victim class,
Hey, Sentinel.
whatever the victim class of the
Welcome.
day may be. It doesn't actually matter how you divide people into different collective groups. What matters is that this false accusation of wrongdoing is being used to manipulate the masses. It's to trick people into thinking that they need the state to fix a problem that doesn't really exist. Another way that they were woke, especially Mao, can be seen in how Mao Zedong blamed Chinese culture for a lot of the alleged ills. In fact, the entire point of the Chinese Cultural Revolution can be said to completely reform the identity of the Chinese people into that of obedient ideologues who would more properly follow Marxist-Leninist ideology. He specifically targeted the youth, and the entire point of the Red Guards was to wage a radical, extremist destruction campaign against what he called the Four Olds: the old habits, the old customs, the old culture, the old ideas. So more than just reform, it would best be called an entire purge. All of the Confucian traditions and religious practices and all the scholarship.
The weird thing is that's all the cool stuff about China. You know, like, that's all the really cool stuff
that it created, all of it was viewed by Mao during the Cultural Revolution as a part of the exploitation class. It was all painted as just another tool of oppression to the proletariat. And if you compare this to, say, the woke ideology of the West that we saw, and honestly intellectual elites within academia still believe it, it's just less prevalent in advertising now because they no longer really believe that it's what the people want. But if you look back on that, a core ideology of it, specifically the anti-white racist element, it was effectively the exact same mentality as Mao Zedong's Cultural Revolution. What do far-left socialist progressives in the United States and other Western countries push? Well, they push this anti-white culture idea that white culture is inherently oppressive and that its ideas of rugged individualism are standing in the way of the next communist revolution, and therefore it needs to be purged to make way for the next communist utopia. It's exactly the same nonsense. just for a different time in history. But the mentality that drove it was essentially the same. Because whites are viewed as being on top of the progressive stack in neo-Marxist ideology, with how progressives tend to view things today, it was effectively the same guilt by association with the Confucian traditions of ancient China. Those traditions were viewed as part of the ruling elite, or the oppressor group of Mao Zedong's days, and thus those traditions had to be destroyed. And we see the exact same thing with the anti-white far left of today. Exact same game, exact same justifications, exact same fallacies. It's just different collective groups being targeted. And this is a very important thing to highlight whenever you're talking to any MAGA communist types, because they're absolutely falling for a massive scam. There is no such thing as MAGA communism. The so-called conservative communists will ultimately turn on conservatism and blame the old conservative values, all with the justification that culture needs to be reformed in order to make way for, again, the next so-called
Mentis is a high level Wojan mancer. So true. I love Mentis's images all the time. Parvek, thank you for the 200. Ironically, to the extent your society is centrally controlled and communistic. Wait, the extent your society is centrally controlled and communistic. Marx is right, as leadership cannot be gained via capitalism. The leader tends to be... That's funny.
Communist utopia. So don't ever let one of these tankies tell you that, oh, well, Stalin and Mao Zedong, they weren't woke. This is all just a creation of the new left. And we're totally not like those guys. They are completely 1000% full of it. The old communist regimes of the past were absolutely woke, and in fact North Korea is still woke. They just manifest the core concepts behind woke ideology in difference. It is all just collectivist envy directed at the more successful groups, and then from a strategy standpoint that is then used to justify state control. So this all brings us to the question then, how did woke capitalism manage to manifest in the West? Because the more light versions of woke capitalist theory, they effectively just look at it, and they're pointing to a phenomenon that does indeed exist. They're just blaming the wrong thing for it. They use the phrase crony capitalism, and that's not really correct. One thing people often forget to look at is the fact that the West has, interestingly enough, become less capitalist over time. We forget that the percentage of GDP going to the state for socialized programs has increased over the course of, say, the history of the United States. And if you were to graph the prevalence of woke ideology in the West, you would notice that it is roughly the same graph. And the reason this happens is because when you have the state getting larger and larger and larger, then that increases the incentive for companies to use the state to their own ends. And so thus another reason that some big companies, specifically the biggest companies, might go woke is just to eliminate the competition through the grift of regulatory capture. After all, they can afford the cost to comply with woke regulations, whereas small companies cannot. And woke ideology is a very effective and very sneaky way to justify the corruption of regulatory capture in this way. Passing laws that require equality checkups on business ultimately just adds to barriers to entry. And it adds to those barriers in a way that progressives won't really notice. In fact, they will often complain about crony capitalism while then supporting the ideology that is currently driving crony capitalism. Because of course, the far left progressives of today, the neo-Marxists, they don't actually understand economics, and so they don't actually understand how this power is being used. They know that there is regulatory capture, but they don't really understand that regulatory capture is always used to increase regulation rather than decrease it. And so if they were to propose a new regulation that would require businesses to pay a $50,000 permit fee for inspecting for diversity, equity, inclusion, or whatever, the neo-Marxists would of course clap, clap, clap. They would be completely on board with that. And then they would not understand why it is these big corporations seem to be just continuously getting bigger. They just don't get it. They don't understand. The fact that the smaller business can't afford to even pay that fee because the fee is higher than their profit margin.
It's the same thing with like licensing, right? Licensing fees, they mean more to people that have less resources. Sorry, they're more prohibitive to people that have less resources. And I for the example, a good example for this is like gun control, right? Where if you're to say that, okay, well, if you want to have a suppressor, then you need to. I'm just making this up. This isn't how it actually is, but let's just say like theoretically, if you wanted a machine gun, you could have one, but then you had to pay like a $10,000 tax in order to get it. That doesn't matter to people that are rich, but then it makes it so nobody poor can buy it, or anybody that's not giga rich can't buy it. Basically, that's actually the case right now, by the way. if you didn't know that, is that you can own a machine gun right now, but there's only a limited amount of them. And because of that, only rich people can have them.
That just completely flies over the neo-Marxists' heads. This is probably one of the most hilarious and pathetic things about BreadTube, and how they became the man who believes that he's fighting against the establishment while supporting the establishment. It's more than just on a cultural level, but it's also something that they fell for on a power level. They failed to realize that the woke ideology that they themselves were pushing, well, all it really did in the end was just give the big corporations, who are in bed with big government, better justifications to continue their corrupt activities. Because here's the thing about quote-unquote crony capitalism. It doesn't actually exist. Or at least it's not really something you should call crony capitalism. Because capitalism is really just free trade, and what they're doing isn't free trade at all. But rather what they're really doing is passing regulations that are in favor of the big corporations, ultimately designed to funnel wealth from small businesses up to the top. And this is then used to subsidize and provide benefits to the top corporations who've invested the most money into lobbying for policies that would favor them. And this is something I posted on X a while ago about. What we call crony capitalism would actually be just more accurately labeled corporate socialism. The way it works is socialist benefits and restrictions of central planning and other communist ideas. They've all been implemented into the economy, but with the caveat that they are strictly only for the big corporations instead of the general public. And the average normie, especially the average progressive neo-Marxist leftist, has serious difficulty understanding this. They can't wrap their heads around why the solution to government corruption is in fact not more government. And the idea of woke capitalism is just another thing that befuddles them. They don't put two and two together and realize that
So, you guys understanding like the concept here? The concept here is that the corporations are so big, they're big enough that they can afford for there to be more regulations, because it is beneficial for them for there to be more regulations, because they can afford to pay somebody to handle compliance for those regulations, whereas a small business owner can't do that. So the more regulations you add, the more inspections, the more licenses, the more all of this like bullshit government stuff that prevents people from just freely competing. It drowns out competition by making it either not worth it or far too hard for people to actually compete. And then big corporations get away with it because they have the resources, they have the money to just pass that off to somebody else because they can just pay them for that. So what that does is it creates less businesses, less smaller businesses means less competition for them in the end. So that's how they benefit from it.
Capital is really just proof that cronyism is socialism. And so the truth of woke capital, I believe, is it's just a case of confusing cause and effect. Whenever socialists...
Drew says you can see this going on real time with like Mamdani and the New York City Council froze rents in surprise. Rents have surged to the highest level ever. Yeah, exactly. I mean, okay, guys, I'll give you... Oh, and thank you, Drew, by the way, for that 1,000. Thank you so much. Rents have surged to the highest level ever. Small landlords are leaving the city. Yeah. Yeah, which means less competition, which means higher prices, right? It's kind of like the capitalism thing earlier where I said, hey, you guys want this free VTuber program? And they're like, we're lowering our prices. We're lowering our prices. Take that, Leaflit. And I said, yes. Yes. That was what I wanted the whole time.
Communist thinking manages to gain a foothold as the dominant ideology, then private businesses gain a incentive to fall in line and pledge their allegiance to
I should have complained about it, actually. I should have been like, I made a mistake. I should have been like, what the fuck? I can't believe you guys are doing this. This upsets me so much that you're lowering your prices just to compete with my free product. I don't know if I could have said it with a straight face though, but I should have done that. So then they call me like, guys, if we want to stick it to Leaflit, all we have to do is lower our prices. I would have been like, yes.
Church of correct think. And there's pretty obvious proof of this when you look at university campus ideological demographics. It was actually as early as the 1980s that it became politically incorrect for university faculty to be right-leaning in any way, long before what we call woke capital started. Rather than capitalism leading to wokeness, it was actually socialists taking over intellectual institutions, who then used their elite positions to change society in ways that would be more in favor of socialist ideology. It was all of that that caused a lot of companies to go woke. woke. Some of the companies, as I mentioned earlier, were just doing it as a part of a PR campaign and advertising by shifting their advertising focus to the Church of Correct Think and advertising in ways that they thought, at least, was going in favor of a modern audience. Well, then some of the bigger corporations, such as financial institutions, like for instance BlackRock and Vanguard got a lot of attention for this earlier, well, they were doing it just as a way to stifle competition and gain benefits for themselves through these corporate socialist policies. But then this all brings us to the final question, because of course this is 2026, and it appears that woke capitalism isn't really a thing anymore. And the answer is because I think they just went too hard. Because again, what the intellectuals were telling these companies wasn't actually true. The ones who went all in on wokeness fear just mainly a PR campaign. The ones that weren't too heavily involved in the cronyism, well, what they were doing was all based on something that the populace didn't actually like overall. And so the cultural backlash, as well as along with the re-election of Donald Trump, it kind of signaled to these companies that...
what game is this? After Image.
What they were being told wasn't actually true. And while Trump has overall been disappointing, one thing he also did that was actually somewhat useful was cutting down on disparate impact, which is a socialist...
Oh, also, Carrot, thank you so much, Carrot and Vegetable, for the 1,000. You being a business owner means that you are responsible for every facet or every aspect of the entire body that needs your attention literally 24/7. Business is what makes America great. Fries go in the bag, quangos. Yeah. And not only that, right, Carrot and Vegetable, it's like a little bit more than that, because you also shoulder the risk, right? You shoulder like a lot of the risk. Like say the company does bad, right? Like 1 year, you're fucked. Like you're giga fucked, right? A lot more. Like you might have to go out without pay or anything like that. In fact, a lot of business people, you just go without pay for a while, right? You often have to do, somebody quits on you. Now you have to do that plus your work. It's not as easy as people say it is. It really isn't.
Which effectively makes the equity fallacy law. That's another big reason behind woke capitalism and why it's actually just socialism. Because the whole diversity, equity, inclusion thing, well, disparate impact makes it so you legally have to, as a private business, have some form of DEI in your policies. If you can get sued for causing a group a disparately negative outcome, then DEI is de facto law. This is something I've pointed out in some other videos before, and it really needs to be stated again because it cannot be overemphasized. The basic core of wokeness has also been law for a very long time, and the law that drives it very much has its justifications rooted in socialist ideology. And that's one thing that Trump actually did do a decent job reducing. And so thus we're seeing a decrease in woke capital, along with companies like BlackRock completely pulling out of it because they realize it's not actually working out for them. However, it's important to not confuse this and think that this means that woke ideology is dead. The idea of envy projected at success, the core basis of woke ideology, is never really gonna go away. The incentive of a loser to point towards a winner and accuse them of cheating, that's always gonna be a thing. That's just a part of human psychology. And of course, if you look at academia these days, you'll realize that it's still very much filled with far left progressives, many of whom are still very much true believers in neo-Marxist ideology. Somewhere right now on a university campus, students are likely being indoctrinated into the idea that social inequities between various population groups are the result of systemic discrimination against them. So woke ideology certainly isn't dead, even in the form that we saw during the woke capitalist era. It's just biding its time until it can sprout again. And when it does sprout again, it will likely change form in some way, and so it's important to keep in mind that core basic thing that wokeness is. Because the next time it comes to life, it's gonna be the same idea, it's gonna be the same envy, and it's gonna be, to some degree, some kind of collectivist nonsense. And it will be used to justify authoritarian actions by the state. And the more people who become aware of this fact, then hopefully the better off we will be the next time it manages to rear its ugly head. Anyways, that's all I have to say. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe. And if you like my content, you can support me on Ko-Fi, Subscribestar, by buying some merch, or again by checking out this video sponsor, Private Internet Access. But yep, I am done. That's it. That is the end of the video. Till next time.
Mentis has very good merch. I really like it a lot. Anyway, I'll send you guys a link to the video, but yeah, very insightful on the entire reasons that woke stuff seems to like find its way into bigger companies. Totally makes a lot of sense as well. I'll link it to you guys.